Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video, I want to talk about the recent changes to medical beds and respawns and how they impact the current and future state of the medical profession in Star Citizen. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the Armory. Also, last week the channel reached 3,000 subscribers, so a big thank you to all of you for your support. So it appears that the 323.1 patch is coming with an unexpected change to medical gameplay. CAG are bringing back some old functionality of medical beds. Specifically, it will now be again possible to respawn in every tier of medical beds. Until now, it was possible only in tier 1 beds with some exceptions. However, historically, when medical beds were first released, every tier allowed respawn as well. This change was supposedly done to provide a less brutal respawn experience by making the option of respawning in the field more widely available to players. Now, this is a pretty significant change, and some would say it even goes against the hardcore nature of Star Citizen and the concept of the death of the spaceman. It might also seem like a step backwards in the development of medical gameplay, but the opposite might actually be true. So let's explore some possible reasons why CAG would do this. I would like to start with a conspiracy theory of sorts that I saw on Spectrum. During this year's Invictus launch week, the CAG have released a medical variant of the RSI Ursa. So some people think that in order to boost sales, CAG have temporarily changed the medical bed mechanics to make the new vehicle more useful. Now, while the change does make the new Ursa very useful, I don't think it will be a factor in the sales of the vehicle, especially given the recent drama around master modes. But the trailer CAG put out when releasing the vehicle certainly didn't help dispel this theory. The trailer shows a disregard for the death of the spaceman and instead shows the ability to respawn infinite times. But this is not something we should take as fact. CAG's trailers and commercials are usually exaggerated and use a lot of satire. But even with that and the other things I'm going to talk about in this video in mind, the Ursa Medevac trailer, while looking great, conveys a false message about how Star Citizen works, which can not only confuse any potential new players, but it also alienates the existing audience, and it was generally in poor taste even if you take it as satire. Now, it's important to remember that what we know as the concept of the death of the spaceman is not just about dying. It's a system that involves death, regeneration, inheritance, and other mechanics that are not in yet. Also, I think it's important to differentiate between regeneration and respawn or revival. Regeneration in Star Citizen involves rebuilding your body based on an imprint you created before death. Each round of regeneration degrades that imprint until you can no longer be used and you die. On the other hand, respawn or being revived in the context of Star Citizen means being brought back from a down state. I think the intention is for dying to be extremely rare, and getting incapacitated being more common, similar to how ships should go into disabled state when they take too much damage. I will explain in a minute why this concept is important. So what are the other possible reasons for CAG to make this change? It's possible that this change was done to encourage testing of the new combat missions around distribution centers. Distribution centers offer a larger scale combat situation compared to the bunkers we've had so far. Also, they're in current testing focus, so CAG want to maximize time spent in combat while minimizing the time spent respawning. Previously, if you died and you didn't have one of the few ships with a tier 1 medical bed around, you would be pulled all the way back to your landing zone or whatever hospital you set your spawn to. From there, returning to action might take quite a long time depending on the distance from your respawn point. On one hand, this travel time dictates the tempo of the game and can serve as a deterrent from taking actions that are too risky. But at the same time, travel is a huge time sink that can be detrimental to a player's session, especially for more casual players. While this does create a more forgiving environment, it also limits the amount of gameplay people who accept medical beacons have available to them. Though this might actually be one of the reasons this change was implemented. The service beacon system as it is very flawed. We know this and CAG know this. It doesn't seem like this is going to be worked on anytime soon. It's possible that the stats and analytics CAG have on how players play Star Citizen has shown that medical beacons are not utilized as much as expected. They would see this by comparing the number of players that get incapacitated with the number of players that backspace back to their spawn location versus players spawned in medical beds and players revived or brought back to a hospital by others. If the number of players that are backspacing is much bigger than the number of players rescued, it tells CIG that medical beacons are not being used, for whatever reason that might be. Fixing this is not a priority, so it would make sense to make the respawn mechanics a bit more forgiving in the meantime. At the same time, the body drag mechanics simply suck. So if you don't have a med gun or a med pen to revive the downed player, you don't have many other options. So again, giving players more respawn options is a good temporary solution. But that's what it is, a temporary solution, and we will talk about some permanent solutions in a minute. Also, waiting around for someone to accept your medical beacon and then waiting for them to show up is not fun. Also, in the majority of cases where you use a medical beacon, the medical team can't get to you without getting a crime stat, even if you're on a lawful mission. Technically, this change actually moves the gameplay closer to what CIG want, which is a more tactical game focused on preparing for the activity you want to do, rather than reacting to any complication that might arise. While all medical beds allow players to respawn, the range at which they do so is however very limited, and you have to set it up before getting incapacitated. So you either have to bring a medical ship with you yourself, or you have to pay someone to do so for you. Also, you're still going to lose all your equipped items on death. So medic gameplay is likely going to change from reacting to medical beacons to assisting people on combat missions by bringing a medical ship and providing healing and regeneration for a share of the profit. Now, while this does diminish the trauma team-like gameplay, it doesn't make it completely irrelevant. There are still going to be people requesting medical assistance using medical beacons. At the same time, access to medical ships or vehicles is limited by in-game or real money purchases. At the same time, CIG are very focused on the vision of players landing far away from their objectives and taking a ground vehicle the rest of the way. The medical Ursa is a very interesting step towards that vision, so we will see how players use this new vehicle. It's also a step towards the desired state of medical gameplay. But what is the desired state? As I mentioned before, dying should be relatively rare, and most of the time you should get knocked out with some degree of injuries. A medic can either stabilize you enough so you can move on your own, or transport you to an evacuation point. This evacuation point would likely be a medical ship or a vehicle. If the available medical bed is a high enough tier, you can get revived and heal back up and return to the fight, or you can be stabilized and moved to an appropriate facility. So technically, temporarily allowing you to respawn in a nearby medical bed is not a terrible idea. It works around the existing issues with body dragging and medical beacons, and it essentially creates a placeholder for the gameplay of a medic dragging you out of the fight and helping you. But I would argue that even this placeholder should have some limitations beside the range at which it works. I think a good way to balance this would be that when you respawn, you will retain any injuries that can't be healed in that medical bed. So, for example, if you died with a tier 2 leg injury but you only have a tier 3 medical bed set as your spawn point, you will retain that injury. You can of course use the bed to administer medications to mitigate that injury, but you will still have to move to a better equipped facility to heal it completely. I think this would make respawning and getting back into the fight less tedious while still incentivizing players to avoid taking damage and preparing by bringing a medical ship. The important thing to note here is that medical gameplay itself doesn't have that many issues. It's the supporting systems like service beacons and body dragging that are problematic. So I think the way forward is to fix these. Service beacons are quite complicated, and I don't think there is a simple fix to the issues of the system. But some improvements might come with expanded reputation systems as well as NPC responders and requesters. Also, specifically for medical beacons during lawful missions, the responder has to be granted permission to enter the restricted area, so they don't get a crime stat while trying to retrieve the person who requested help. On the other hand, body dragging can be replaced pretty easily with some of the tech CIG have previously shown off. I think a good alternative would be a hover stretcher type device, which you can deploy next to the downed player and move them onto it, and then use that stretcher to push or tractor beam them out of the area and then to a medical bed. Or even allowing us to carry downed players on our shoulders to avoid the terrain interactions that currently break body dragging. And with that being said, that's all for today. What do you think? Does this change decrease difficulty? How is it going to impact medical organizations? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.